It was just another ordinary morning at the central station. Sunlight streamed through the high glass roof, washing the marble floor in a warm golden haze. The air was filled with the rhythm of movement, heels clicking, wheels rolling, voices blending into a steady hum that felt almost comforting. Trains arrived, doors opened, and the crowd flowed like a living current. To most people, it was simply another day on the move. To Officer Mark and his partner Rex, it was routine. Mark adjusted his cap, his uniform crisp and his step steady. Beside him walked Rex, a strong German shepherd with a vest that read, Police K-9. The dog's amber eyes moved constantly, alert but calm, scanning faces, reading gestures, absorbing the details people never noticed. They had walked this path 1,000 times before, same hallways, same echo, same smell of metal and coffee. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. Just peace wrapped in noise. Mark glanced down at Rex, half smiling. Another quiet morning, huh, buddy? Rex's ears twitched but he didn't respond. His pace was measured, his breathing even. For 5 years, they'd worked together, and Mark trusted his instincts more than any manual or protocol. Rex had a sense for things that human eyes missed, and sometimes, those small moments made all the difference. Mark didn't know that today would be one of them. They moved past a row of benches where a businessman sipped coffee and a woman soothed a crying baby. Announcements echoed overhead, reminding passengers to mind their belongings. It all felt safe, predictable, until Rex stopped. No bark, no growl, no sound at all. Just a sudden halt. His body stiffened, head raised, eyes locked ahead. Mark slowed, following the line of his gaze through the shifting crowd. That's when he saw her, a little black girl, maybe 7 years old, walking beside a white woman in a neat blue coat. The child's jacket was pink, faded at the sleeves, her braids tied with uneven ribbons. Her small hand was swallowed by the woman's grip. At first glance, they looked like any mother and daughter traveling together. But then Mark noticed it, the hesitation in the girl's steps, the way her body tilted slightly away, the stiffness in her shoulders. Rex's ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring. Something in that movement had caught him. Mark's brows furrowed. The woman walked briskly, eyes straight ahead, her expression calm, almost too calm. The girl, though, glanced around with wide, searching eyes that didn't fit her face. Then her fingers moved, 5 soft taps on the woman's back. Tap. 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 A strange rhythm in the chaos of the station. No one else noticed. Not the crowd. Not the guards. Only Rex. The dog's head tilted slightly, his muscles tense beneath his fur. Mark felt it through the leash, a vibration, like a pulse of unease. "What is it, boy?" he murmured under his breath. Rex didn't move. He just stared. The woman turned briefly, as if sensing eyes on her, then smiled politely before pulling the child closer. The little girl's face turned downward, her lips pressed tight. Her small hand clenched around a worn stuffed bear hanging from her bag. 5 taps. Again. Mark blinked, unsure if he'd imagined it. Maybe she was nervous about traveling. Maybe it meant nothing. But Rex didn't believe in coincidence. His tail stiffened, his gaze following the pair until they disappeared toward the ticket gates. In the corner of Mark's eye, he noticed a man standing near the vending machine, a tall figure with a dark jacket, watching the woman and the girl for a second too long before slipping into the crowd. Mark's gut tightened. He turned back to Rex. The dog's eyes were still locked on the direction they'd gone. Something was off. He could feel it, not loud, not obvious, but there, like a quiet dissonance in the rhythm of morning. Around them, life went on, suitcases rolling, children laughing, announcements echoing. Yet beneath it all, something unseen had shifted. A signal had been sent. And only one set of eyes had heard it. The sound of the station grew louder as Mark and Rex continued their patrol. The rolling suitcases, the hiss of coffee machines, the echo of the loudspeaker, all merged into a restless rhythm that filled the air. People moved like waves around them, faces blurring into a sea of motion. To everyone else, it was just another morning rush. But to Rex, something in the current was wrong. The dog walked slower now, his focus sharp and unshakable. His head turned toward the ticket gates where the woman and the little black girl had disappeared moments before. His muscles were tense beneath his coat, every sense on high alert. Mark felt the tension through the leash. "Come on, boy," he said quietly. Nothing there. But Rex didn't move faster. He just stared ahead, eyes burning with quiet determination. Mark sighed, shaking his head. "Maybe you're just tired," he muttered with a small smile, trying to push away the unease creeping into his chest. For years, he'd trusted Rex's instincts, but sometimes even the best-trained dogs got distracted. Maybe a scent, maybe a memory. He told himself not to overthink it. Still, something about that child's eyes lingered in his mind. They weren't afraid of the crowd, not exactly. It was something deeper, a fear that came from the inside, the kind you couldn't fake. Mark adjusted his pace, scanning the crowd again. He spotted the woman and the girl near the ticket line, the same pair moving with an odd precision, like they were trying not to be noticed. The woman's hand gripped the child's wrist too tightly. The girl stumbled, her shoe catching the edge of the marble floor. She almost fell. The woman yanked her back up instantly, forcing a smile when she saw people watching. "Keep up, honey," she said sweetly, her voice light but her tone sharp underneath. The girl nodded silently, her small shoulders trembling. For a brief moment, her eyes lifted, and met Mark's. It was only a second, but in that second, he saw everything. The panic. The plea. The exhaustion of someone too young to carry such silence. Then she looked away, as if she hadn't seen him at all. Mark's throat tightened. Rex let out a low breath through his nose, a subtle sign of discomfort that only a handler would recognize. He'd seen Rex in explosions, riots, and rescues, but this was different. The dog wasn't reacting to danger. He was reacting to emotion. That realization hit Mark harder than he expected. He followed their movement with his eyes as they joined the queue at the gate. The woman leaned down, whispering something in the child's ear. The girl nodded, her hand gripping the handle of a small pink backpack. Then, faintly, her fingers twitched again. 5 gentle taps against her own arm. The pattern was the same. Mark froze. Rex noticed it too, his ears perked, body leaning forward. "What's going on, buddy?" Mark whispered. The German shepherd didn't answer. He just took one slow step toward the pair, tail straight, breathing steady. Mark exhaled, torn between curiosity and protocol. He could feel people brushing past him, impatient to get through security, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding right there between the lines. He remembered every training manual that told him not to act on instinct alone. But he also remembered every case where instinct had saved lives. Rex turned his head slightly, eyes flicking to Mark as if waiting for permission. The handler hesitated. Logic said walk away. Instinct said follow the dog. He tightened his grip on the leash. "All right," he murmured. "Let's just see." They moved closer, blending into the stream of travelers. The woman was handing over tickets, chatting politely with the clerk. On the surface, she was calm. But up close, Mark saw the tremor in her fingers, the sweat along her hairline despite the cool air. Rex sniffed, his body rigid. Mark swallowed hard, feeling that old familiar tension between reason and intuition tightening inside him. Was he imagining this? Maybe she was just a nervous parent. Maybe the girl was tired. Yet every time he thought that, Rex's body said otherwise. The dog's instincts were clear, absolute. And that made Mark's uncertainty even louder. The crowd thinned as the pair stepped past the gate. Mark watched them disappear again, swallowed by the station's endless corridors. He stood there for a long moment, heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. Somewhere deep down, a quiet thought formed, a whisper he didn't want to hear. What if Rex was right? The crowd thickened near the ticket checkpoint, a restless tide of motion and sound. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling above, breaking into sharp golden beams that sliced across the marble floor like bars of light and shadow. The smell of metal, perfume, and coffee hung heavy in the air. Voices overlapped, footsteps echoed, and yet, beneath all that noise, something quieter, something fragile, was taking shape. Mark walked slowly beside Rex, their pace steady, eyes trained on the pair ahead. The woman in the blue coat moved briskly, her back straight, her grip on the little girl's wrist unrelenting. The girl stumbled once more, almost losing her balance as her small pink shoe scuffed against the floor. The woman bent down, whispering something in her ear, then pulled her along even faster. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The sunlight caught the girl's face just as she looked up. Her eyes were wet, wide, shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. Her lips trembled, moving as if forming words she couldn't dare to speak. And then, she did it again. 5 taps. Harder this time. The sound was faint, lost in the chaos around them, but Rex heard it. He froze mid-step, muscles tensing beneath his vest, a low growl rising deep in his chest. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. Mark felt the vibration through the leash before he even heard the sound. He glanced down, frowning. "Easy, boy," he whispered, trying to sound calm. But Rex didn't relax. His gaze was fixed forward, locked on the girl. The growl deepened, a quiet, deliberate warning. Mark followed his eyes and saw the child's hand again, still trembling, still pressing against the woman's back in that strange rhythm. It wasn't random. It wasn't nervous habit. It was a message. He didn't know how, but he could feel it in his gut. The woman turned suddenly, her face framed by the golden light, her expression composed yet too still, too careful. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked smoothly, her voice carrying over the crowd. People glanced over, curious. Mark straightened, forcing a polite smile. "No, ma'am. Just routine," he said evenly. His tone was steady, but his fingers had tightened around Rex's leash until his knuckles turned white. The woman smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes, and turned back toward the line. For a brief second, she bent down and stroked the girl's hair, her voice soft, her movement tender. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured. Almost there. To anyone watching, it looked like comfort. A mother calming her child. A simple moment of affection. Mark almost believed it. For that fraction of a second, he wanted to believe it. The crowd relaxed. The murmuring resumed. The world kept moving. And then Rex growled again. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. The woman stiffened. The girl froze, her hand still midair, fingers hovering before curling back into her palm. Mark's heartbeat quickened. He didn't know what was happening, only that Rex was certain. He had seen that look in his partner's eyes before, in bomb threats, in hostage calls, when the air itself seemed to hold its breath. But never over a child. Never like this. The woman turned slightly, forcing another smile, but her eyes were sharper now. "He's a beautiful dog," she said, her tone light. "So well trained." Mark nodded once, keeping his expression neutral. "Yes, ma'am. He's very observant." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. The woman's smile faltered just for a heartbeat. The girl glanced up again, meeting Rex's gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, a silent conversation that no one else could hear. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then the tear she'd been holding finally slipped free. It traced a line down her cheek before falling onto her sleeve. Rex made a quiet whine, low and soft, almost like sympathy. Mark saw it all, the fear, the message, the connection, and for the first time that morning, he stopped thinking about procedure. He trusted what he saw in that child's eyes, what he felt through the leash in his hand. The woman turned away, leading the girl forward through the checkpoint. The crowd closed around them, the golden light dimming as a cloud passed over the roof. Mark stood frozen, the station's noise fading into a dull hum in his ears. The moment had lasted only seconds, but it had changed everything. That girl wasn't scared of the crowd. She wasn't scared of the officer. She wasn't even scared of the dog. She was scared because the dog was the only one who had truly hurt her. The checkpoint was jammed with people. Lines curled around metal barriers, announcements echoed from speakers overhead, and the smell of perfume and coffee mixed with the hum of tension. Sunlight bounced off the polished floor, scattering across faces and luggage, turning the air into a blinding haze. But for Mark, all of that noise faded into the background. All he could hear was the sound of Rex's breathing, deep and steady, the kind that came before something broke loose. The German shepherd pulled hard on the leash, his body coiled like a spring. Mark tightened his grip. "Rex, heel," he ordered, his voice low and firm. But Rex didn't listen. He never disobeyed commands, not once in 5 years. Yet now, the leash trembled with resistance. His tail was stiff, ears forward, eyes fixed ahead. Mark followed his gaze and saw the woman and the girl again, just a few steps from the gate. The woman was showing her ticket to the clerk, smiling politely, while the child stood beside her, small and silent, clutching that worn pink backpack. Then Mark saw it, the girl's fingers moving again. 5 taps. Precise. The exact same pattern. His pulse kicked hard. "Tell me I'm not crazy," he whispered. Rex growled softly, the sound vibrating through the leash like thunder under the floor. That was his answer. Mark's training screamed at him to stay calm, to follow procedure, to gather evidence before acting. But instinct, raw and human, rose higher than protocol. He took a breath and stepped forward. "Ma'am," he called out. The woman turned, startled, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before her expression smoothed into polite confusion. "Yes, officer," she asked. "I need to check your bag," Mark said, voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the noise around them. A few people nearby slowed, watching. The woman blinked, feigning surprise. "Excuse me. You have no reason." "I have one," Mark replied quietly, eyes narrowing. "And he's standing right here." Rex let out a single bark, sharp and commanding, the kind that carried authority beyond language. Phones came up instantly. People started recording. The air thickened with curiosity and unease. The woman laughed nervously, shaking her head. "You're making a mistake. We're just trying to catch our train." Mark took a step closer. "Then you won't mind a quick check." The woman's eyes darted left, then right. Her fingers tightened around the girl's wrist. "It's really not necessary," she said, voice trembling slightly. Mark's gut twisted. He could see it now, the sweat on her temple, the tension in her jaw, the way the child avoided looking at her. This wasn't normal. He'd seen fear before, but not like this. "Not the kind you wear like a mask." "Ma'am," he said again, his tone dropping an octave, firm but calm. "Please, open the bag." The woman hesitated, then forced a smile. "Fine." Her voice was too quick, too bright. She reached for the zipper, but instead of opening it, she grabbed the girl's hand and turned sharply toward the exit. It happened fast. Mark barely had time to react before Rex lunged forward. The leash snapped taut, the sound slicing through the air. The dog moved like lightning, cutting off her path in one powerful stride. His bark exploded through the terminal, echoing off the high ceiling. The crowd screamed, scattering back. Phones shook in trembling hands. Rex! Mark shouted, rushing after him. The woman froze mid-step, her body jerking to a stop as Rex stood in front of her, muscles rigid, teeth bared just enough to warn, not attack. Don't move. Mark's voice boomed through the chaos, authority and adrenaline merging into one. The woman turned slowly, her face pale, her smile gone. This is absurd, she snapped, trying to sound in control. Call him off. Mark shook his head. Not until you explain why my K9 is reacting like this. The tension was unbearable. The crowd had formed a circle now, murmuring, filming, waiting for something to happen. The little girl stood frozen between them, tears shining in her eyes. Rex shifted slightly, his head tilting toward her. The leash trembled. Mark could feel it, something passing between them again, silent, invisible, alive. The woman's hand clamped around the child's arm. We're leaving, she said sharply. No, Mark replied. You're not. For a long moment, everything went still. Even the crowd seemed to hold its breath. The woman's calm cracked, her voice rising. You can't just, ma'am, Mark interrupted, his tone like stone. That's enough. He took one slow step forward. Rex mirrored him perfectly, shoulder to shoulder, eyes locked on the woman's face. She flinched, her grip loosening for a split second. The child looked up, her lips parting, whispering words that only Rex seemed to understand. The dog's ears flicked. His growl deepened. And just like that, the balance shifted. The power in the space changed hands, from the woman's control to the silent authority of instinct. The camera flashes, the murmuring crowd, the trembling hands, all faded. For a heartbeat, the world froze in a single frame, a frightened child, a trembling criminal, and a police dog standing between them, breathing calm into chaos. Mark's thoughts were gone. Training didn't matter anymore. Only instinct remained, the same one that had bound him and Rex for years. And as he stood there, staring into the eyes of a woman who suddenly looked nothing like a mother, he knew this wasn't over. The truth was no longer hidden. It was standing right in front of him, wordless and undeniable. The security area fell into an uneasy silence. The bright overhead lights washed everything in pale white, stripping away color and pretense. The noise of the terminal had vanished, all that remained was the sound of breathing, the steady rhythm of Mark's, the quick shallow gasps of the woman, and the quiet, watchful stillness of Rex. The crowd had drawn back, phones still recording, eyes wide, no one daring to speak. Mark stood in front of the inspection table, his voice low but firm. Put the bag down. The woman hesitated, her knuckles pale around the strap. Then, slowly, she set it on the counter. The sound of it hitting the metal surface was louder than it should have been. Rex's ears twitched. His nose hovered an inch above the zipper, the low growl in his throat steady and controlled. Mark swallowed, his pulse hammering in his ears. All right, he said quietly. Let's see what's so important. He reached for the zipper. Every movement felt heavy, deliberate, like time itself had slowed. The woman's breathing turned ragged. The girl, Lena, stood a few feet away, clutching her stuffed bear so tightly her fingers trembled. Mark unzipped the bag. The sound sliced through the silence like a blade. For a moment, nothing. Then he opened it wider. Inside lay a scatter of ordinary things, folded clothes, a blanket, a plastic hairbrush. But tucked beneath them, half hidden, was a small cheap cell phone, its back taped shut. Next to it, a handful of papers. Mark reached in, pulling them out one by one. A driver's license. A passport. Another passport. Different names, same face. The woman's. His hands paused, the realization settling in slow and cold. He reached deeper. Beneath the documents was a small envelope. Inside, photographs, grainy, taken from a distance. Children, all different, all alone. Mark's breath caught. His voice came out barely a whisper. "What is this?" He turned to the woman. Her expression had shattered, the mask of calm was gone. "You don't understand," she blurted out. "You have no idea." Her voice cracked on the words. Rex growled louder now, his fur bristling, not out of rage but certainty. The crowd gasped, phones lowering as the atmosphere thickened with disbelief. Mark placed the photos on the table, his fingers shaking slightly. He didn't need anyone to explain. The truth was right there, silent but screaming. The woman backed away, tears streaking her face. "You don't know what they'll do to me," she said, her voice frantic. "They'll come for us." Mark's tone hardened, steel beneath restraint. "Us?" She froze, realizing her mistake. Behind her, Lena's small voice broke the silence for the first time. "He heard me." Everyone turned. The little girl's words were soft, trembling, but they cut through the air like a revelation. Mark looked at her, the stuffed bear pressed to her chest, tears glistening under the harsh light. Rex sat down beside her, his gaze gentle and unwavering. Mark knelt slightly, his voice low, almost reverent. "She didn't need to speak," he said, glancing between the girl and the dog. "She already told us everything." The crowd around them seemed to stop breathing. The woman collapsed into a chair, hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. "You think I wanted this?" she cried. "They made me. You don't understand." Her words dissolved into sobs. Mark didn't answer. He simply stood there, eyes cold but heavy with the weight of what he'd uncovered. Rex moved closer to the table, sniffing the bag again, then glancing up at his handler as if to confirm what they both knew. Mark nodded slowly. The child was not her daughter. The documents were fake. The photos were evidence. And this wasn't just a desperate woman trying to flee, it was a thread in something much larger, darker, and organized. He turned toward a nearby officer and gestured silently for backup. Within seconds, uniformed personnel stepped forward, forming a line around the scene. The woman looked up, panic in her voice. "You don't understand," she said again, louder this time. "If I talk, they'll kill me." Mark didn't flinch. "Then it's time someone listened," he replied. Rex let out a low, deliberate bark, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It wasn't anger, it was affirmation. Around them, the murmurs began to spread, disbelief turning to horror, horror to pity. People lowered their phones, realizing this wasn't a spectacle, it was a rescue. Mark looked at the girl again. Her eyes, once terrified, now held something else. Relief. She reached out a small trembling hand and placed it on Rex's head. "He heard me," she whispered again, quieter this time, like a prayer. Rex blinked slowly, his tail moving once, calm and sure. Mark exhaled, the truth settling deep in his chest. In a world full of noise, a child had spoken in silence, and a dog had listened. The case wasn't over, not even close, but for the first time that day, justice had found its voice, and it had come from instinct, not words. Night had fallen hard over the city. Rain slicked the streets, turning the glow of police lights into bleeding streaks of red and blue that danced across the pavement. Engines hummed in the darkness, radios crackled, and the low tension of command voices filled the convoy. Inside the lead vehicle, Officer Mark sat behind the wheel, the glow of a GPS screen flickering across his face. The signal on the map pulsed steadily, a small red dot leading them toward the outskirts of town. Rex sat beside him in the passenger seat, alert, his amber eyes reflecting the light from the dashboard. Mark's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You ready, partner?" he asked softly. Rex made a quiet sound, a small whine that wasn't fear but focus. It was the same sound he made before every breakthrough. The rain hit harder as they turned down a deserted industrial road. Ahead, the outline of an old warehouse loomed through the mist, its roof sagging, windows dark. The signal blinked faster now. That's it, Mark muttered. He killed the lights and parked behind a rusted fence. The other units followed, forming a silent perimeter. Officers moved in low voices, weapons ready but eyes cautious. Mark opened the door and stepped out, the cold night air cutting through his uniform. He unclipped Rex's leash. "Find them," he whispered. Rex lowered his nose to the ground immediately, tail stiff, body tense with purpose. He moved like a shadow through puddles and debris, his paws silent against the wet concrete. Mark followed, flashlight cutting narrow beams through the dark. The warehouse door loomed ahead, a massive iron slab, chained shut from the outside. Rex stopped in front of it, ears perked, nostrils flaring. Then came the faintest sound from within. A muffled cry. Small. Fragile. A child's voice. Mark's heart clenched. "We've got something," he said into his radio. "Move in, now." Within seconds, 2 officers joined him, crowbars in hand. The chain snapped with a metallic crack that echoed through the night. They pulled the door open, hinges screaming. The beam of Mark's flashlight sliced through the darkness, landing on a cluster of small faces. 5 children huddled together, wrapped in thin blankets, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. The youngest clutched a torn stuffed animal, staring up at the officers as if unsure whether to trust what she saw. Mark crouched down, lowering his weapon. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." One of the older kids whispered, "Are you really the police?" Mark nodded. "Yeah, we are." Behind him, Rex moved slowly forward, tail wagging gently, his nose brushing the children's hands in reassurance. The tension in the air broke. One of the boys reached out to touch the dog, whispering, "He found us." Mark's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He always does." The relief lasted only seconds. From outside came the roar of an engine, the screech of tires tearing across wet asphalt. Mark spun toward the sound. "We've got movement," someone shouted. Headlights flared through the warehouse window, a black SUV speeding away from the back lot. "They're trying to run." Mark's pulse surged. "Go, Rex." The German Shepherd exploded into motion, water splashing under his paws as he bolted through the open door and into the storm. Mark was right behind him, shouting coordinates into his radio. "Unit 3, suspect vehicle heading east." The SUV swerved wildly, tires spitting mud and water. Rex ran full speed, his body a blur against the dark. The rain hammered down, lightning flashing overhead. The chase was pure chaos, metal, light, and instinct colliding. The SUV cut hard around a corner, nearly clipping a fence. Rex leapt over a trash bin, closing the distance with terrifying precision. The driver glanced back through the mirror, eyes wide, panic setting in. He hit the gas harder. Mark shouted through the radio, "Don't lose him, stay on his flank." He could barely see through the rain, but the rhythm of Rex's paws never faltered. Then came the moment every handler dreads, a skid, a slip. The SUV's rear tire kicked a wave of water straight into Rex's path. The dog lost footing, tumbling sideways onto the slick ground. "Rex!" Mark yelled. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then, through the haze of headlights and rain, Rex pushed himself back up. His front paw was scraped, bleeding, but he didn't stop. He ran again, faster, harder, driven by something beyond training. "Come on, buddy," Mark whispered under his breath as he ran. "Just one more time." The SUV tore down the narrow service road, engine screaming. But Rex was closing in now, only feet away. The driver rolled down his window, shouting, "Get off me," and tried to swerve. Too late. With one final leap, Rex lunged at the open window, his jaws locking onto the driver's sleeve. The man screamed, jerking the wheel. The SUV spun out, skidding sideways before crashing into a chain-link fence with a metallic roar. The world went still except for the hiss of steam rising from the crumpled hood. Mark reached them seconds later, gun drawn, shouting, "Police! Don't move!" The driver stumbled out, clutching his torn arm, face twisted in pain and fury. Rex stood between them, soaked, bleeding slightly, but steady, his growl low and controlled. The man sneered, spitting through the rain. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "You don't even know who you're dealing with." Mark's jaw tightened. "Maybe not," he said coldly, "but I know you won't hurt another child." He cuffed the man, pressing him against the hood. The suspect glared, but his defiance died when he saw Rex standing only inches away, eyes locked, silent and unyielding. Backup units arrived within moments, lights flashing across the wreckage. Officers poured out, weapons ready, then lowering them as they saw the scene. One of them exhaled, muttering, "Damn, that dog." Mark knelt beside Rex, brushing his wet fur. "You did it again, partner." Rex's tail moved once, slow and deliberate. The rain eased into a drizzle, the distant sirens fading into the hum of the night. The rescued children were being loaded into warm vans behind them, safe at last. Mark watched them go, his chest heavy but proud. This wasn't just another case. It had started with one silent signal, a child too scared to speak, and ended with the instincts of a creature who refused to ignore it. As he looked down at Rex, battered but steadfast, Mark realized something simple and profound. Sometimes, justice doesn't shout. Sometimes, it listens, runs through the rain, and never stops until the innocent are found. The night had broken into dawn, and the city was slowly waking. A thin layer of fog drifted across the streets as the first rays of sunlight spilled over the steps of the police station, turning the cold concrete gold. The chaos of the night before had faded into quiet. Radios were silent now, coffee steamed in paper cups, and tired officers moved slower than usual. Inside the station's courtyard, Rex lay beside Mark, his fur still damp but his eyes calm and watchful. The K-9 badge on his vest caught the light, the word "police" gleaming softly against the morning haze. Mark sat next to him, elbows on his knees, shoulders heavy with exhaustion but softened by a quiet pride. He looked at the dog and smiled faintly. "You know," he said under his breath, "you did more than any of us last night." Rex didn't move, but his tail brushed once against the ground, a silent acknowledgement. The station doors opened behind them. A detective stepped out, leading a man and woman forward. They looked hollowed by sleepless nights, eyes red and trembling with disbelief. When they saw the little girl standing beside an officer at the doorway, they froze. The world seemed to stop for a heartbeat. Then Lena ran. "Mom! Dad!" Her voice cracked with joy and tears. The reunion was instant, arms wrapping around her, faces pressed together, sobs muffled into laughter. The officers nearby turned away quietly, some smiling, others blinking back the emotion in their eyes. Mark stood, watching the moment unfold. He felt something warm build in his chest, the kind of feeling that made all the long nights worth it. He glanced down at Rex again. "You see that?" he murmured. "You did that." The dog lifted his head slightly, ears twitching as if he understood. The light shifted, painting them both in gold. The laughter of the reunited family carried across the courtyard like music. After a while, Lena broke free from her parents and walked toward Mark and Rex, still holding her stuffed bear. In her other hand was something small and metallic, the K-9 tag that had fallen from Rex's vest during the chase. She knelt beside the dog, smiling through tears. "I think this belongs to him," she said softly. Mark looked at her, then at Rex, who sat perfectly still, watching her with patient eyes. "You can keep it," Mark said. "You already earned it." Lena's smile widened, but her eyes stayed serious, deeper than a child's should be. She reached out and gently touched Rex's head. "He hears what no one else can," she whispered. The words hung in the morning air, soft but powerful, like a truth that didn't need to be explained. Mark's throat tightened. He looked away for a moment, then back at the little girl, his voice low, almost a whisper to himself. How many voices have we never heard? The question lingered, unanswered, as the wind stirred the flag above them. Lena stood and hugged Rex one last time before turning back to her parents. Her small hand waved as they walked toward the waiting car. Mark watched them go until they disappeared down the street, the sunlight catching in the girl's hair. For a long while, he didn't move. The city hummed softly around him, the distant traffic, the rustle of leaves, the faint bark of another K-9 unit starting its day. He looked down at Rex, who had settled again beside him, calm and alert as always. You don't just protect lives, buddy, Mark said quietly. You change them. Rex shifted closer, resting his head against Mark's leg. The moment was simple, wordless, but it said everything that needed to be said. The camera would have pulled back then, two silhouettes bathed in the rising sun, a man and his dog framed against the golden light of a new day. And over that stillness, a single thought would echo: sometimes heroes don't wear capes, or badges, or uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four paws and listen to the cries no one else can hear. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.